The second half of the notes for this unit are about biodiversity, which is just like it sounds. It's the diversity, it's the variety of living things. Bio, living, diversity, variety. So there's different types of biodiversity. There's genetic biodiversity, species biodiversity, and ecosystem biodiversity. It's important for this variety. If you think back to when we were in the evolution unit and I talked about how if there's variety in a species, you get, if there's something that comes along that changes the ecosystem or the environment where something lives, if you have a variety of different organisms in that species, chances are greater that one of those varieties will be able to survive. Background extinction is one way that biodiversity is lost. Background extinction is a gradual process that happens a little bit at a time. In recorded history, the number of extinctions since 1600 are listed in this table here. And what we see, they go with the groups here, and then the different areas here, mainland, island, ocean, total, and what you see is that the greatest percentage of extinction is mammals. The number of species total is right here. The largest number of extinct species, now you can't read it, is flowering plants. So just sheer numbers of species lost, flowering plants. The percentage, though, because there are so many species of flowering plants, is small. Mass extinction is another way that biodiversity is lost. This is what we see throughout the geologic time scale, where we see many species going extinct at once. And the 5 most recent mass extinctions, this one right here, 65 million years ago, is when a meteor or some kind of extraterrestrial object is thought to have hit the Earth and kicked up a bunch of sediment, blocked out the sun, caused massive climate change, and wiped out the dinosaurs. Humans do a pretty good job, sarcastically, of messing with biodiversity by their actions, by our actions. These are the different ways that biodiversity can be threatened or lost. We're going to talk about each of those in a little bit greater detail. So overexploitation is just eliminating members of a species in sheer numbers. The pioneers, the people who moved west, hunted bison for their pelts, for their skins, because they made great coats, and would just hunt the bison and leave them, skin them and leave them. And that wiped out pretty much the majority of bison on the Great Plains. They're not extinct. Their numbers are going back up, but it's a slow process. Passenger pigeons, extinct. We used them to our own advantage, and they have died out. These are endangered species, ocelots, and rhinos. The rhinoceros horn is thought in some cultures to have medicinal properties, heal sicknesses and diseases, and because of that, rhinoceros are hunted for their horns. So that's overexploitation. Habitat loss, very important to know, is the main cause of extinction. Habitat destruction, cutting down rainforests for farmland, for lumber. A habitat disruption, oil spills, overfishing. Habitat fragmentation is another cause of loss of biodiversity. If you think of the word fragment, it's a piece of something. So habitat fragmentation is where a large woodland is separated. It's separated into two by a housing development or a road or something like that. This creates smaller habitats, less space, fewer species members in that space, and because they're more interbreeding, there's less genetic diversity. Another problem with habitat fragmentation is the edge effect. If you have more edges, it changes the habitat. The forest is different by a road than in the interior. Think about a forest preserve anywhere around our area. By a road, the land looks a lot different than if you walk way in on a path. Pollution, I'm sure you've heard about before. The dumping of chemicals into the air, into the water. Acid rain is caused by water and the air mixing with pollutants. Acid rain it can change the pH of waterways, it can destroy architecture. Couple of other terms here. Biological magnification is what you see in the picture. The increasing concentration of a pollutant as it moves up through the trophic levels. So what we see here, this is DDT. This is an insecticide that doesn't really break down for years and years and years. And so it starts out in the water system. The producers take that up into them, and then the zooplankton eat the producers. Now becomes a little bit more concentrated because there's fewer zooplankton than producers. And then the small fish eat the zooplankton. There are fewer of those, so it becomes more concentrated. That chemical, in this case it's DDT, becomes more concentrated as you move up through an ecological pyramid because there are fewer numbers. It's the same amount of poison, fewer numbers of organisms to distribute that poison between. The other thing is the dumping of nitrates and phosphates into waterways. Phosphates are part of soaps, detergents. Nitrates are part of fertilizers. So those can be deposited after we wash our hands in the sink, after we do a load of laundry, after we take a shower, do the dishes. Those soaps, those detergents contain phosphates. They go into the water supply. Fertilizers can run off of crops after a hard rain and can go into the waterways. Nitrates and phosphates are actually limiting factors, limiting nutrients for plants. They're really good for plants. They help plants grow. And so what we see is what we call an algal bloom, this crazy algae growth, this bloom of algae in waterways, in ponds, in streams. And you might be thinking, okay, Mrs. Roll, you've taught us that plants are good. They provide us oxygen. They do great things for us. What's the big deal? Well, here's the thing. Algae sits on the top of the water. It collects the sunlight, and if it gets thick enough, it's going to block out the sun for all the plants that live below the surface of the water. So those plants die out because they don't have any light to do photosynthesis, and whatever organisms, the herbivores that feed on those plants down below, will die off as well. So you're disrupting an entire food chain by having too much nitrate and phosphate in the waters. Introduced species, we can think of plenty of examples where introduced species can disrupt a food web because they don't have any natural predators. Dandelions were brought over from Europe as a food source, and now we see them everywhere because, first of all, one little root part, if you don't pull it out, can regenerate an entire plant. There's an adaptive advantage there. And they weren't meant to be in this ecosystem. Sparrows came across from Europe on boats or with boats. They don't have any natural predators in this ecosystem, so they eat whatever they need to eat and nothing preys upon them. Buckthorn. We're going to go out to the woods and back when the weather gets nice, and I'll show you what buckthorn looks like. It was used as a landscape plant, and it has some advantages over normal plants that occur in our ecosystem. They keep their leaves for longer, so they get more nutrients, more photosynthesis, and their leaves come out earlier as well. There are berries that birds like to eat, so the buckthorn spreads through seed dispersal, and so they overcrowd and crowd out the other natural species of our ecosystem around here. Fire ants don't have any natural predators. They're moving up through our nation from the south. We talked about why these are bad. If you don't have a natural control, a natural predator for any of these introduced species, or they have a reproductive advantage, then they're going to crowd out the naturally occurring species in an ecosystem. This you may have heard about in social studies. If not yet, you will. Renewable versus non-renewable resources. So renewable resources are replaced by natural processes faster than they are used. Really important to understand though, renewable resources are not unlimited. Here are some examples. Agricultural plants, animals, clean air, and clean water are all renewable in theory. Non-renewable resources can't be replaced in a short period of time. It takes a long time for them to be replaced. These are also found in limited amounts. The big ones are fossil fuels like oil, coal, minerals, and especially species. When they're gone, they're gone. So there's Unit 11 notes. We're counting them down. We only have 2 more after this.